Welcome to my class, and in this class we will discuss interpreting a graph. Now before going to a detailed discussion on the interpretation of graph, we need to know what a graph is. Now a graph is a diagram showing the relation between variable quantities, typically of two variables, each measured along one of a pair of axes at right angles. Now there are different types of graphs, just like the line graph, the bar graphs, histograms, pie charts, or the Cartesian graphs. Now why do we need to interpret a graph? It is important to learn about interpreting graphs so that we can understand graphing, which is a fundamental part of algebra or later maths courses. Now interpreting graphs involves understanding what the shape of a curve represents in real life situations. We should also understand what slope means and how to interpret what a high or low slope value represents. An understanding of the plotting points is also important here. Now, here are some simple steps which will help you to read a graph. What you need to do is that first determine the type of graph, then read the title or the legends. Then examine any other text that is available. Next, identify the variables on the axis and what they represent. Then observe the x-axis and the y-axis, determining what each number of the graph means. And lastly, identify the patterns in the data. So, what are the rules for interpreting a graph? To interpret a graph or a chart, first we need to read the title. Then look at the key information that is there, and then read the levels. Then you have to study the graph to understand what exactly it shows. Then you need to read the title of the graph or chart, and lastly, you need to tell what information is being displayed in the graph. So what is the first thing you need to consider while interpreting a graph? We consider four critical factors that appear to affect graph comprehension: the purposes for using the graph, task characteristics, discipline characteristics, and the reader characteristics. So what is the summary of interpreting the graph? It involves picking out the data points of interest and give a quick synopsis of what the graph is about. Interpreting a graph or a chart involves digging a little deeper. This may include completing calculations to determine an average or a sum or difference of data values. So, what are the three recommended steps for reading a graph? First, read the graph. Second, analyze the graph. And third, provide a conclusion for the graph. Next, we will move on to the 5 essential needs that you need for graphing. So what are the 5 essential elements of good graphs? A good graph has a title which describes the experiment. The graph should fill the space that is allotted for the graph. Each axis should be labeled with the quantity being measured and the units of measurement. Each data point should be plotted in the proper position and a line of best fit. So, how to learn line graphs? First, the title. The title offers a short explanation of what is in your graph. Then the legend. The legend tells what each line represents. Then the source. The source explains where you found the information that is in your graph. Then the x-axis. In line graphs, the y-axis runs vertically up and down. Then the data. X-axis. What words are used to interpret graphs and charts? When writing or speaking about line graphs, the following action words are basically useful. What are the verbs? Like rise, grow, climb, pick, decline, drop, reduce, remain, stable, stay, constant, crash, plummet. Adjectives like sharp, substantial, huge, considerable, slight, minimal, significant. So here are also some useful phrases that you need to interpret a graph. Now every graph actually tells you a story. So the creator has to be a good storyteller. She or he needs basic knowledge in creating and interpreting the graphs produced. Also, the person trying to understand the story needs some basic knowledge about graphs. Otherwise, reading a graph is like reading a text in a foreign language. So, while introducing a graph, we say about the topic and I will just tell you about what topic you will use, and for that what kind of language we need to know. For the topic you can use I would like you to look at. I would like you to look at. This is used while introducing a topic. So, or regarding the graph you can say the graph shows. Regarding the topic introduction you can say let me show you. Regarding introducing a topic you can say let me show you. While introducing that particular topic in a graph you can say that diagram outlines. So when you will be showing something in the topic you will say let me show you, and while discussing that in that graph you will say the diagram outlines this and this. Or you can say let's have a look at. When you will be introducing a topic you will say let's have a look at, and when you will be showing that in a graph you will say this table lists. So let's have a look at regarding the topic, and when you will be doing that in the graph you will say this table lists. Next, you will be introducing something in the topic. You can say let's turn to. Let's turn to. In the graph you will say this chart represents. This chart represents. In the topic you can say to illustrate my point. To illustrate my point, let's look at this. Or in the chart you will say this chart depicts. So in the topic you will say to illustrate my point, let's look at the subject. In the chart you will say this chart depicts. Or you can say just like bringing a conclusion, or you are trying to bring something as a subsequent result or something. You can say as you can see from this data. As you can see from this data, you are interpreting a graph. So you will be using while discussing a topic as you can see from this data. In the chart you will say this chart breaks down. This chart breaks down into such and such data. Or you can say if you look at this chart you will see, or if you look at this chart you will notice, or if you look at this chart you will understand. So these are the basic phrases we generally use for introducing a topic and depicting that or interpreting that in the chart. There are certain vocabulary we use just like to show something that is rising in the graph. If something is showing a rise in the graph, you will say increase, you will say rise, you will say rocket, you will say climb, lift, grow, going up, jumping, surge, shoot up, soar, arise, an increase in growth, an upward rising, improvement, a jump, extend, expand, push, put, step up, and all these words. Now, the words that we'll be using while the line is going down, you will say what? Decrease, drop, decline, fall, go down, slump, a fall, a decrease, downward falling, decreasing state. Okay. Now, if there is no change in the graph is maintaining a straight line. Remain stable. So the words, the phrases or the words you will use like is that remain stable, constant, steady at, stay at the same level, stabilize, keep stable, hold constant. Now if you indicate a change of direction, you will use level out or level off, stand at, stop, falling, rising, stop falling, or start rising. Now, if there is a frequent change in the graph, you can say fluctuate or fluctuation. If something is at the top, you can say reach a peak, peak, reach its or reach their highest point. Or if something is at the bottom, you will say hit a low point, reach its or reach their lowest point. So, how can we describe the change that we see on the graph? Now, when we see a change in the graph, we can describe the change in terms of degree or sometimes in terms of the speed. So when we are describing the change in degree in the graph, we generally use adverbs like dramatically, vastly, hugely, a lot, significantly, considerably, moderately, slightly, substantially, or sometimes just a little. Now, when we describe a change in the graph in terms of speed, we use adverbs like rapidly, quickly, swiftly, gradually, gently, or little by little, slowly, or quietly. Prepositions are very important, and while interpreting a graph, we also use prepositions like arise from x to y. Arise from x to y. Or to increase by 5%. If we say arise from x to y, or sometimes we say to increase by 5% or 10%, or sometimes we say an increase of 5% in, say for instance, kestrel sightings or anything else. So, the words that you use while interpreting a graph is very important because that actually helps you to interpret a graph properly and present the data in a perfect way. So when you are interpreting a graph, you need to remember the technical sides as well as the language with which you will be able to present the data that you get from graph. Now, before ending this class, I'll just show you a diagram and I'll show how you will be able to tell about this graph, or you will be able to interpret a graph. So in the graph, in the diagram, you can see that there is a line which is moving. It's going up and then down and then it's maintaining a same level. So how will you interpret this line? So this line shows that there is a rise, then it reaches the peak, then it comes down, and then it maintains a straight line. So how would you say? Suppose this is the graph showing a price. The price is going up or the price is going down, or it's maintaining a straight line, it's maintaining a balance. So how would you interpret this line? You will say the price reached a peak before falling a little and then maintaining the same level. So you will interpret the price that you get from this graph in this way. The price reached a peak before falling a little and then maintaining the same level. So this is how you will be able to interpret the graphs. Just go through the words that we have used, the list of words that we have given, and these words, these adverbs, these phrases that we have discussed in the class will actually help you to interpret a graph perfectly. Thank you.